The heat of the alien sun beat down on Daniel Carter as he adjusted his backpack, beads of sweat trickling down his brow. The young archaeologist had spent weeks exploring the desolate planet of Velar 9, following ancient maps and fragmented texts that hinted at a forgotten civilization. He had ventured alone into the ruins, driven by curiosity and the hope of uncovering something extraordinary. The ruins were vast and eerie, with crumbling stone towers reaching toward the sky and intricate carvings etched into the walls. Daniel's boots crunched against the dusty ground as he entered a large domed chamber at the center of the ruins. His flashlight beam revealed a strange pedestal at the room's heart, holding an object that shimmered faintly in the dim light. As he approached, his breath caught in his throat. The artifact on the pedestal was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was a crystalline structure shaped like a horned spiral, glowing faintly with an otherworldly blue light. Symbols carved into the pedestal seemed to hum with energy, their meaning long lost to time. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering over the artifact. Every instinct told him this was something important, something powerful. Ignoring the caution that tugged at the back of his mind, he reached out and touched the crystal. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the chamber came alive with light. The carvings on the walls glowed, casting shifting patterns across the stone. A sudden rush of energy surged through Daniel, and he stumbled back, his heart pounding. Before he could process what was happening, the air in front of him shimmered, and a figure began to materialize. She was unlike anything he had ever seen, a stunningly beautiful being with deep blue skin, glowing eyes, and elegant curved horns. Her long, dark hair seemed to flow like liquid, and her sharp features gave her an aura of both power and grace. She wore a shimmering outfit that seemed woven from starlight itself. The being studied him with a curious expression, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "A human," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, but carrying a hint of surprise. "It's been centuries since your kind dared to activate this artifact." Daniel blinked, taking a step back. Who are you?" She tilted her head, a faint smirk appearing on her lips. "I am Lyria, guardian of this relic. By touching the crystal, you've awakened me, and by the ancient laws of my people, I am bound to grant you 3 wishes." Daniel's heart raced as he processed her words. 3 wishes. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale. He glanced back at the artifact, now glowing brightly, and then at Lyria, who stood with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "I didn't mean to awaken anything," he stammered. "I was just exploring." Lyria raised an elegant eyebrow. "Intentions matter little. The artifact has deemed you its wielder. Choose your wishes wisely, human." Daniel took a deep breath, his mind spinning. This was far beyond anything he had prepared for. As he stood there, facing this otherworldly being, he couldn't help but wonder what he had just unleashed, and what it would mean for the rest of his life. Daniel stared at Lyria, the shimmering succubus-like alien, as she stood before him with crossed arms. Her horns gleamed faintly in the soft blue light of the chamber, and her glowing eyes studied him with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "Well," she asked, tilting her head, "your first wish. Surely humans haven't lost all sense of imagination in the centuries since I last encountered your kind." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. 3 wishes. It sounded simple, but the possibilities were overwhelming. He could ask for riches, power, or even immortality, but none of those things felt right. He wasn't a greedy man. He was an archaeologist because he wanted to understand, to uncover the mysteries of the universe. Taking a deep breath, he finally spoke. "I want knowledge. I want to learn about your people, your history, your culture, and your understanding of the universe." For a moment, Lyria looked taken aback. Her glowing eyes widened, and a faint blush appeared on her blue cheeks. "Knowledge," she repeated, her voice softer now. "You could have anything, and you asked to learn about me and my kind." Daniel shrugged, feeling awkward under her gaze. I've always believed knowledge is the greatest treasure. The more we understand, the more we can grow. Lyria blinked, and then, to his surprise, she laughed. The sound was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. A scholar's wish, she said, her smirk returning. Very well, human. I will grant your request. She stepped closer, her movements graceful and fluid. Raising her hand, she conjured a sphere of light that floated between them. Inside the sphere, images began to swirl, scenes of a majestic, advanced civilization, with towering cities and shimmering skies. Daniel's breath caught as he saw beings like Lyria, their horns and glowing eyes marking them as something far beyond human. These are my people, the Etherans, Lyria explained. We were once a thriving race, masters of energy and creation. But our ambition led to our downfall. Wars over power and knowledge tore us apart. This artifact, she gestured to the glowing crystal, was created as a safeguard, a means to test the worth of those who sought our wisdom. Daniel leaned forward, captivated by the images and her words. You said it's been centuries since a human touched the artifact. Does that mean your people are gone? Lyria's expression darkened, and she nodded slowly. I am the last of my kind, bound to this relic for eternity. I've seen many come and go, most seeking selfish desires. But you, she trailed off, her glowing eyes meeting his. You're different. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy for her. For all her power and confidence, there was an undeniable sadness in her voice. I didn't mean to awaken this, he said gently, but I'm glad I did. There's so much we can learn from each other. Lyria tilted her head, studying him once more. Perhaps. But you still have 2 wishes, human. Use them wisely. As the light of the sphere dimmed, Daniel felt a newfound sense of purpose. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he was determined to make his wishes count, for both their sakes. The silence in the chamber was heavy as the swirling images faded from the glowing sphere. Daniel sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, his mind spinning with everything Lyria had shown him. The Etherans had been a civilization of beauty, brilliance, and tragedy. He could still see flashes of their towering cities and hear echoes of their harmonious songs. Lyria watched him with quiet amusement, her glowing eyes studying his reaction. You seem overwhelmed, human, she teased, her voice carrying a soft lilt. Do you regret your wish? Daniel shook his head firmly. Not at all. This is incredible. Your people, they were extraordinary. Lyria's expression flickered, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw a hint of sadness. They were, she said softly, but their downfall was their inability to see beyond their own desires. Power consumed them, leaving nothing but ruins and artifacts like this one. Daniel frowned, leaning forward slightly. You've been trapped here for centuries, watching the same mistakes repeat. That must be lonely. Lyria's smirk returned, but it was gentler now. I don't need your pity, human. I've grown accustomed to my role. Besides, I've had centuries to learn about those who stumble upon the artifact. And I must say, you're an interesting one. Daniel chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. I don't know about that. I'm just a guy who loves uncovering mysteries. But I have to admit, meeting you is more than I ever expected. Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, the faint glow of her skin casting shadows on the chamber walls. You're different from the others. Most who come here are consumed by greed or ambition. You, however, seem to care about something greater than yourself. Daniel looked up at her, surprised by the sincerity in her tone. I believe there's so much we can learn from each other. Humanity is far from perfect, but we're always striving to grow, to connect. Lyria tilted her head, intrigued. And what is it that drives humans to keep striving, despite your imperfections? Daniel thought for a moment, his gaze distant. Hope, I guess. The hope that tomorrow can be better than today. That we can build something meaningful, even if we make mistakes along the way. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, She seemed at a loss for words. Hope, she murmured, as if the concept was foreign yet fascinating. Perhaps that is what my people lacked. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden rumble that echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath them trembled, and faint, distant voices reached Daniel's ears. He shot to his feet, his heart racing. What was that? Lyria's expression darkened, and she closed her eyes, focusing. Scavengers, she said, her voice laced with disdain. They must have tracked your signal when you activated the artifact. Daniel's stomach sank. They're here for the artifact, aren't they? She nodded, her horns glinting in the dim light. And they won't hesitate to destroy anything in their way. Daniel clenched his fists, determination flaring in his chest. Then we'll stop them, together. Lyria raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Bold words, human. Let's see if you can back them up. As the rumbling grew louder, Daniel and Lyria prepared to face whatever came next. Their bond, forged through shared curiosity and understanding, would now be tested in the face of danger. The rumbling grew louder as Daniel and Lyria stood in the ancient chamber. Dust and small pebbles fell from the ceiling, and the faint glow of the artifact flickered ominously. The voices outside became clearer, gruff and commanding, their tone unmistakably hostile. They're getting closer, Daniel said, his heart pounding. He glanced at Lyria, who remained calm, her glowing eyes fixed on the chamber's entrance. These scavengers are nothing but parasites, Lyria said, her voice sharp. They'll strip this place of everything valuable, including the artifact, and likely take you as well. Daniel swallowed hard, his fists clenching. Then we can't let that happen. Lyria gave him a sideways glance, a small smirk forming on her lips. Brave words, human. Do you have a plan, or is this where your hope carries you? Daniel glanced around the chamber, his mind racing. The pedestal and artifact were the only objects of significance. The rest of the room was bare stone and dust. We could try to hide the artifact, he suggested. If they can't find it, maybe they'll leave. Lyria shook her head, her long hair shimmering in the faint light. They won't leave until they've turned this place to rubble. Hiding is not an option. Daniel's mind raced. What about your powers? Can you defend us? Lyria hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing. The artifact grants me certain abilities, but they are tied to its wielder. If you wish for my protection, you must use one of your wishes. Daniel stared at her, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He still had 2 wishes left. Using one now could jeopardize their chances later, but the alternative was unthinkable. He took a deep breath. Fine. I wish for your protection. A sudden surge of energy filled the chamber as Lyria straightened, her confidence growing. The artifact's glow intensified, and a faint shimmering aura surrounded her. Wish granted, she said, her voice resonating with power. Stay close, human. The scavengers burst into the chamber moments later. There were 5 of them, clad in patched armor and armed with crude energy weapons. Their leader, a hulking figure with a scar running down his face, stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at Daniel and Lyria. Well, the leader sneered. What do we have here? A human, and a pretty little alien. Hand over the artifact, and we might let you live. Lyria stepped forward, her aura pulsing with energy. You dare threaten me in my own domain, she said, her voice cold and commanding. Leave now, or face the consequences. The scavengers laughed, raising their weapons. Big talk for a relic. The leader spat. Take them. Before they could fire, Lyria raised her hand, and a wave of energy erupted from her palm. It struck the scavengers like a shockwave, sending them tumbling backward. Daniel watched in awe as Lyria moved with graceful precision, deflecting their attacks and incapacitating them one by one. The leader, now alone and weaponless, scrambled to his feet. This isn't over, he shouted before fleeing into the shadows. As the chamber fell silent, Daniel let out a shaky breath. That was incredible, he said, staring at Lyria. She turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. You wished for my protection, and I delivered. But this is far from over. The scavengers will return, and next time, they'll bring reinforcements. Daniel nodded, determination hardening his features. Then we'll be ready. We still have 2 wishes left. Lyria smirked faintly, her confidence returning. Let's hope you use them wisely, human. As the dust settled, Daniel knew their journey was only beginning. Together, they had survived the first challenge. But the stakes were higher than ever. The air in the chamber was still heavy with the aftermath of the battle. Daniel leaned against the stone wall, catching his breath as he watched Lyria pace back and forth, her glowing eyes filled with thought. The scavengers had been driven off, but their leader's parting words echoed in his mind. This isn't over. They'll be back, Daniel said, breaking the silence. And if they bring more firepower, we won't stand a chance. Lyria nodded, her expression serious. You're right. They'll return with reinforcements, and this time, they won't leave until the artifact. And you are in their hands. Daniel clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing on him. So what do? We can't stay here, but we can't just run forever either. Lyria stopped pacing and turned to him, a spark of determination in her glowing eyes. There is one option, but it's risky. Daniel straightened, intrigued. I'm listening. She gestured to the artifact on the pedestal. The artifact has more power than you realize. It's not just a tool for granting wishes. It can also act as a beacon, calling for help. If I activate it, it could summon allies from across the stars. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Allies? You mean other Etherans? Lyria hesitated, her gaze dropping. There are no other Etherans left, but there are those who respect the legacy of my people, beings who might come to our aid if they sense the artifact's signal. Daniel frowned, considering the idea. And the downside? The beacon will draw attention. Lyria said, her voice grave. Not just from potential allies, but from enemies as well. It's a gamble. Daniel paced the chamber, his mind racing. The thought of calling for help was tempting, but the risk was undeniable. Still, doing nothing wasn't an option. Let's do it, he said finally, his voice firm. We don't have a choice. Lyria nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Very well, human. Prepare yourself. This won't be easy. She approached the artifact, placing her hands on its glowing surface. The chamber filled with a brilliant light as the artifact pulsed with energy, sending waves of power rippling through the air. Daniel shielded his eyes, feeling the sheer force of the beacon as it activated. Outside, the night sky above the ruins lit up with streaks of light as the artifact's signal shot into the stars. Lyria closed her eyes, her voice low and melodic, as she chanted in a language Daniel couldn't understand. The ground trembled beneath them, and the hum of the artifact grew louder. Minutes passed, and the light finally dimmed. Lyria stepped back, her glowing eyes meeting Daniel's. The signal has been sent. Now, we wait. Daniel nodded, his heart pounding. How long until we know if it worked? It could be hours or days, Lyria said. But we must stay vigilant. The scavengers will sense the power surge, and they'll return before long. As they prepared for the inevitable, Daniel couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. For the first time, they had taken the fight into their own hands, refusing to let fear dictate their actions. Whether allies or enemies answered the call, he and Lyria were ready to face whatever came next, together. The ruins were unnervingly silent, save for the faint hum of the artifact as it continued to emit its signal into the stars. Daniel and Lyria sat near the pedestal, their senses on high alert. The calm before the storm felt oppressive, as if the very air around them held its breath. How will we know if anyone answers the beacon? Daniel asked, his voice low. His fingers idly traced the strap of his backpack, where his tools and a small energy pistol rested. Lyria's glowing eyes scanned the room, her expression calm yet focused. "We'll feel it," she said. "The artifact's energy will respond to those who come for it, ally or enemy." Daniel sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Let's hope it's allies." Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the ruins. Lyria straightened, her horns gleaming faintly in the light. "They're here," she said, her voice firm. Daniel's stomach tightened as he grabbed his pistol. "Scavengers." Lyria nodded, stepping toward the entrance. "Most likely. They won't let the artifact slip through their fingers." Moments later, the scavengers burst into the chamber. This time, there were more of them. 10, heavily armed and ready for a fight. Their leader, the scared man from before, strode forward with a sneer. "I told you this wasn't over," he growled, raising his weapon. "Hand over the artifact, or we'll take it by force." Lyria stepped forward, her aura glowing brighter as she drew on the artifact's energy. "You should have stayed away," she said coldly. "This will not end well for you." The leader laughed, motioning for his men to spread out. "We're not afraid of you, Relic. Let's see what you've got." The battle erupted in an instant. Lyria unleashed a wave of energy that sent several scavengers flying, their weapons clattering to the ground. Daniel ducked behind the pedestal, firing his pistol at the advancing enemies. His shots were far from perfect, but he managed to disarm one of the attackers. Lyria moved with precision and grace, her glowing form a blur as she deflected incoming blasts and struck back with controlled bursts of power. The artifact pulsed in rhythm with her attacks, amplifying her strength. Despite their superior numbers, the scavengers were no match for Lyria's abilities. One by one, they fell, either incapacitated or retreating in fear. The leader, however, refused to back down. He lunged toward the pedestal, aiming to grab the artifact. "Not so fast," Daniel shouted, stepping into his path. He swung his backpack, catching the leader off guard and knocking him to the ground. Before the man could recover, Lyria was there, her energy forming a barrier around the artifact. "You've lost," she said, her voice echoing with power. "Leave now, or face the consequences." The leader glared at her, his face twisted with rage, but he knew he was beaten. With a snarl, he scrambled to his feet and barked orders to his remaining men. They retreated, their shouts fading into the distance. As the dust settled, Daniel slumped against the pedestal, his chest heaving. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with relief. Lyria stood tall, her glowing aura fading slightly. "For now," she said, her tone cautious. "But the beacon is still active. More will come." Daniel nodded, determination hardening his gaze. "Then we'll face them, together." For the first time, Lyria smiled, not the smirk of confidence she usually wore, but a genuine, heartfelt smile. "You're stronger than I thought, human." Daniel grinned, gripping his pistol tightly. "And you're more amazing than I could have imagined." Their fight wasn't over, but in that moment, they felt invincible. Two unlikely allies standing against the galaxy's greed. The sound of footsteps echoed through the ruin, the air tense with anticipation. Daniel and Lyria stood side by side, their eyes scanning the entrance to the chamber. The scavengers had retreated, but as Lyria had warned, their battle wasn't over. The artifact signal was still out there, pulsing like a beacon in the night sky. Daniel's hand hovered over his weapon, his eyes narrowing as he tried to peer into the dimly lit corridor. "I don't like this silence," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyria's sharp senses picked up the faintest shift in the air, her eyes glowing brighter as she stepped closer to Daniel. "Someone is coming," she said, her voice low but steady. "But this presence, it's different." Daniel stiffened, a mix of concern and curiosity gripping him. Different how? Before Lyria could respond, the entrance to the chamber lit up, the shadows parting as a figure emerged from the darkness. The newcomer was cloaked in a long, flowing robe that shimmered faintly with light, and their face was hidden by a hood. The figure stepped forward, moving with calm authority, and the air seemed to hum with their presence. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, his finger on the trigger, but not yet firing. The figure stopped a few feet away, their voice resonating through the chamber. "I come in response to the artifact's call," they said, their tone calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "I am Eric, a protector of ancient knowledge." Lyria's eyes narrowed, studying the newcomer with a mix of suspicion and recognition. "A protector?" she asked. "You've been watching." Eric lowered their hood, revealing their face, a tall, pale being with silver-blue skin and eyes that shimmered like stars. Their presence seemed both serene and intimidating. "I was drawn here by the signal, and I have been observing." "Yes," Eric replied, their gaze flickering to the artifact. "You did well to call for help, but I see you are not alone in this fight." Daniel and Lyria exchanged glances. "What do you want?" Daniel asked, his hand still hovering near his weapon. He couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The artifact was meant to bring help, but this person was a complete unknown. "I seek to offer assistance," Eric said, their voice softening slightly. "I am one of the last of my kind, an ancient order of beings who safeguarded the knowledge of the universe. The artifact's call awakened a memory I thought long forgotten." Lyria's expression softened, but she was still wary. "And why should we trust you?" Eric paused for a moment, their eyes meeting Lyria's. "Because our goals are aligned. I know what the artifact is capable of, and I know what the scavengers want. They are not the only ones seeking it." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Who else is after it?" "The Traskians," Eric said, their voice heavy with gravity. "They are an empire bent on conquest, and they seek the artifact to expand their power. It has already begun. If we do not act swiftly, they will destroy everything." The air in the chamber grew heavy as the weight of Eric's words settled in. Daniel turned to Lyria, who had fallen silent, clearly processing this new information. The Traskians were a terrifying force in the galaxy, and if they were now after the artifact, everything they had fought for was at risk. "What can we do?" Daniel asked, his voice tight with urgency. Eric's eyes glimmered with determination. "We fight, together. I can teach you how to use the artifact's full power, but you must be ready for what's to come." Lyria stepped forward, her gaze steady. "We don't have much time. Lead the way." The decision was made. With Eric's help, they would learn what the artifact truly held and prepare for the war that was about to consume them all. The fate of the artifact and the galaxy rested on their shoulders.